Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to be unlocking the secrets of Agatha All Along, episodes 1 and 2. So much to discuss. There will be spoilers, but as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have a September contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. All right, so this is the first official branding of Marvel Television. The first time we're getting something under that category. Remember, there's studios, television, animation, Marvel Spotlight, and there's even still special presentations. But this is Marvel Television. And the first two episodes actually have titles that are part of the Ballad of the Witch's Road. Notice the two titles for episode 1 and 2, and they are part of this overall ballad. I'm going to keep coming back to this anytime it's referenced, and in this case, episode 1 is Seeketh Thou the Road, and episode 2 is Circle Sewn with Fate, Unlock Thy Hidden Gate. Supposedly there are lots of hints and clues for what's going to happen throughout the series within these ballads. All right, so we open with Agatha/Agnes humming, and she's actually humming the Witch's Road song, showing that even though she's under Scarlet Witch's spell still, she remembers the Witch's Road song, and in fact, she's legit driving down a road. We're going to see several allegories for the Witch's Road throughout these episodes. But is she really driving? No. Actually, we find out later this whole time she's been in her house or in her yard. And in this case, she actually unknowingly built a car. And that's what she's sitting in right now. She's not driving, she's sitting behind this. So that's really funny. As she says, this is not a car. Okay, so this is once she's outside the spell. So what I'm going to do is go back and forth between inside the spell and outside the spell because it's really clever how they've done all this. So she is a detective inside the spell. And in fact, this is kind of a parody/homage of the Mayor of Easttown show, which is really cool. And we see her walking up to Herb. I'm going to use the show names. To Herb, who says, "Hey, neighbor," which I think is actually what he really said outside the spell. Because we're going to see, notice the police tape, right? The yellow police tape. That is the same thing we're seeing in real life of the yellow flowers, separating Herb from Agatha's house. And yes, we will get to why she's totally naked. That'll get to later. But anyway, outside the spell, notice, she's just walking across the yard to talk to Herb. That is so stinking cool. Now, what's hard to tell is how often is Herb and the others actually saying these specific lines, or how often does Agatha just think she is? But I think sometimes they're actually saying these lines, because Herb says, "Surprised to see you out here, detective." And then notice, when we get back to outside the spell, Agatha's like, "So what? You just have been spouting nonsense and you've just been humoring me?" So sometimes I think they were just playing along with her. Oh, that's so funny. But anyway, she says, "I'm enjoying the fruits of my undeserved disciplinary action," meaning that she's stuck at home. How funny, right? But that's also alluding to her being stuck in a disciplinary action by the Scarlet Witch. So very clever. All right, so now we get lots of hints that the body, which isn't really a body because this is all a spell, but is Wanda, and it's describing her death. Because Herb says she was crushed, and Agnes says, "By what?" And he says, "Something big and heavy," which of course is alluding to when Wundagore Mountain collapsed on her. I don't think she died, and we'll get to that more. But yeah, you can see the red flash there. I think that was her escaping. But nonetheless, to that very point, Agnes says, "Is she dead?" And Herb's like, "Oh, she's really most sincerely dead." That's like Feige saying, "Oh no, I'm telling you, she's dead," and then winking at us and going, "Well, you never know." So I don't think she's dead myself, but let me know in the comments what you think. So, okay, lots of hints at this being Wanda's body, because at the end of WandaVision, when she walked off, she had a hood on, and notice the body's got a hood. Also in 838, she had similar clothing, not exactly similar, but the same look and feel of the shirt especially, and no shoes. Isn't that interesting? Because we're going to see that she has no shoes here too. And then we've seen these stained hands before, right? These stained hands happen when you use the Darkhold. Because there's Agatha using it, here's Wanda using it near the end of a WandaVision, her dark magic, and then here she is using it in Multiverse of Madness. So yeah, that's another hint that this is Wanda. And then I'm not sure if this is supposed to symbolize something. I mean, it's really cool looking, but the water kind of makes like a horseshoe around her. Let me know if you have any thoughts on that, or if this is just a cool visual shot. But then Agatha finds her brooch in, quote unquote, the water. But remember, this is all happening at her house. So she's literally finding the brooch in the yard. because, again, she's standing next to Herb. So Herb's probably watching her just pick it up and put it on. And that's the same brooch she had in WandaVision. And this is kind of a cool shot where it makes it look like she's wearing it while it's in the water. But then you can tell she's very affected by this body. She looks it in the face and sees the face. We don't get to see the face. But she asks, "Who are you?" So then Herb says, "You don't seem like yourself." So again, I think this is a line he really said outside the spell, because she's like, "Oh, and who is that exactly?" But then outside the spell, he explains something very interesting. He says, "You haven't been yourself the past few days." So, okay, she's been a nosy neighbor for the last 3 years, we're going to see. But in the last few days, she's been a little weirder. In fact, he explains it. It's almost like you got bit by the true crime bug. Okay, so I have a theory. I think either Rio or Teen, probably Rio, cast a spell on top of Wanda's spell to put Agatha/Agnes in this new True Detective scenario to try to pull her actually out of Wanda's spell. Pretty wild, right? It's like a spell on top of a spell. But for some reason, in the last few days, she started acting really weird. So then back inside the spell, she says, "Oh, I'll try to be more cheerful for you next time, Herb." So yeah, she's probably legit saying that to him. Pretty wild. All right, so then we get a true crime version of the Ballad of the Witch's Road. I love that. And notice the cast is their names inside the spell, Agnes, and then we get Phil, Norm, Dottie, Herb, Dennis, and just Mrs. Hart, because, Agatha doesn't actually know her real name. That's funny. And then notice how the tape kind of looks like The Witch's Road. Very, very cool. And then I love it. I want to see WandaVision. It sounds like a great show. All right, so then we have Dottie the librarian, ? I mean, is Agatha did she really go to the library? And is Dottie really there? Or, as we learn outside the spell, where she's like, "Oh, I get it, librarian," referring to Dottie, chief of police, because he eventually will be the chief of police. Really funny. So, yeah, I don't think she even went to the library. I think Agatha this whole time was either in her house or in her yard. That is so funny. But anyway, back inside the spell, she thinks at least she's at the library and has this library card. And there are so many hints and clues on this thing. It's just crazy. First of all, Westview Public Library. Whether or not right now she's in the library, there is a Westview Public Library. We saw it in WandaVision. It's where they actually held the Crime Watch. The author is listed as Ugo Andrew, but that's an anagram for Wundagore. And you could kind of argue the author is Wundagore because the original spells were on Mount Wundagore. And of course, we saw in the episode that the first letter of the title here spells out Darkhold. So yeah, pretty cool, pretty cool. We will come back to that thing. There's a lot more to talk about on it. But so Dottie in her librarian role is saying, well, this book wasn't checked out. It was stolen 3 years ago, which would imply Wanda taking the Darkhold from Agatha after, Wanda put Agatha in the nosy neighbor spell. So, okay, that makes sense. But she says we have plenty more copies in natural sciences. So my guess is this is an example of something the real Dottie, outside the spell, and I know her name isn't Dottie outside the spell, but anyway, for simplicity, I'm going to call her Dottie the whole time. She didn't probably say this line. This is something the spell is making Agatha think she said. But anyway, Agatha walks over to look at these extra copies of the Darkhold. Notice the area is under repair. There's burn marks on the floor and burn marks all over the place. And then somebody whispers, "There was a fire." Every last copy was burned. And it's the mailman. I love it. Everybody's back from WandaVision just for short little cameos, yes, but so cool to see him hanging out there. And sure enough, Wanda did destroy all of the versions of the Darkhold, right? Dr. Strange explained. She destroyed the Darkhold in every universe. So I think Rio cast this spell on top of Wanda's spell to try to pull Agatha out, and she's trying to convince her it's safe. You can come out now. Wanda's dead, right? You see her dead body. The Darkhold is destroyed. She doesn't have any power over you. Everything is safe. I love that. That's really cool. All right, so in walks the quote-unquote chief of police with another hint towards Wanda. Soil samples from under the fingernails and toenails of the Jane Doe came back, only found in Eastern Europe. And at least according to the comics, Mount Wundagore is indeed an Eastern European location in Transia. So, okay, great. And then Rio finally makes an appearance, quote-unquote, in the spell. And she's trying to break Agatha out of it, trying to push her little by little. She says, if you want to be in control, you can be. And of course, I love Aubrey Plaza. If you haven't seen Legion, you got to check it out. She's so good in that. I mean, obviously Parks and Rec, lots of other things, she's great. But Legion, she's fantastic. But she says, if you want to be in control, you can be. She also says, is this really how you see yourself? And then she says, yeah, you've lived here your whole life. Isn't that true, Agnes? And opens her eyes. She has the best eyes. Oh my gosh. And then even says it's almost like she just magically appeared. Well, the magic, I think, is Rio's magic. Again, Rio wants Agatha out of the spell. Now, why does she want her out? My guess is because she wants to kill Agatha, but not while she's got this spell on her. She wants a real fight, which we'll see as soon as she breaks out of the spell. All right, so now Agatha/Agnes takes the brooch to try to figure out what is it. And she learns that it is maiden, mother, and crone. Those are the three symbols on the brooch. And she's like, oh, what? No working professional goddess? That's funny. But yeah, she's talking obviously to Norm. But mother, maiden, crone, those are more lines from the ballad. So very interesting. So her brooch literally seems to be part of the Witch's Road ballad. All right, so then we also learn that inside of it, it's a locket, and inside of it is some hair. And we'll come back to maybe this a little bit more. We don't really learn what this is. I've got some theories, and I want to know yours as well. But yeah, we learned it's definitely a locket. All right, so this is funny. This is a clever reminder that Agatha is legit sitting at home this whole time, right? Because in comes the chief and says, go home, Agnes. And she says, I am home, chief. Yeah, literally, she is actually at home. That's funny. So, in other words, she never left her house. When she drives up to the house here to walk back in, at most, all she did is walked outside the house and stood in the yard. Crazy. But anyway, notice the number on the house, 2804. It is the exact same house from WandaVision. I love that. So cool. So cool. All right, so then we get another mystery going on here that we're going to get a resolution for eventually, which is Nicholas Scratch. So she looks in her room, or looks in a room in the house, and sees this little, kids stuff. In particular, here's a drawing, and notice Nicky. He signed it Nicky. Looks like a very young kid would have signed it like that. And then here he got a first place in the children's concert choir, Nicholas Scratch. And notice how clever the little bunny is sitting right there. Yeah. So you might remember in the WandaVision show, we all thought this bunny was something special. Turned out not yet. I think it will be in this show. We're finally going to figure out what the heck this bunny is. But here she is letting the kids play with it, and they say, I like it here. And she says, is it because Senior Scratchy is such a good listener? So once we knew the name was Senior Scratchy, we're all like, oh, that's Nicholas Scratch from the comics. That's Agatha's son. Well, maybe, maybe not. We don't know. I mean, he won't be an adult son because certainly from what we saw from the room there, he was very young. And in fact, there's a line later in episode 2 where Jennifer says, who's this? Another child sacrifice? Yikes. Does that mean that Agatha sacrificed her kid, Nicholas Scratch? Oh my. I mean, there are some very good mysteries to be unpacked throughout this series. All right, so now, we're obviously Agnes is back home, Agatha is back home, and Rio comes in to push a bit more because Agnes says, oh, I'm pretty sure the body came from Eastview. And Rio's like, Eastview? See, I thought you turned into a pumpkin that far afield. In fact, she says, where have you traveled? And she has nothing. Agatha has nothing. She realizes, I haven't traveled. I've stayed here in Westview. And she says, do you remember why you hate me? Which is interesting. It definitely shows they have a past. And it's not a good one. Well, maybe at times it was. We'll get to that. But certainly had some issues in the past. But while Rio is down there trying to push Agatha out of the spell, Teen, quote unquote, breaks in. Now, why do I put the quotes there? I think he's literally breaking into her spell. I think he is competing with Rio to be the one that breaks Agatha out. Because it does not seem like Teen and Rio are working together. It seems like Teen is trying to take Agatha away from Rio so that he can be the one to break her out of the spell. So anyway, Agatha says, hey, what are you doing? And Teen takes off out the window, books it down the street, and ends up getting hit. And what's interesting is when he gets hit, notice Agatha's face. I mean, sure, you're concerned anytime someone gets hit, but she looks like she just lost, well, a child. Is something going on there? Is there some part of her subconscious that senses that might be her child? So is it Wanda's kid? Is this going to be, Billy? Or is this Nicholas? Or is it both? Who knows, right? But I just thought it was interesting how very, very emotionally distraught she was when he gets hit. Well, it turns out it was Mrs. Hart that hit him. That's too funny. He came out of nowhere. So now it's time to take him in for questioning. Why did you break in? Notice you can see in the reflection, Rio is there with her. That's Agatha and Rio. But also interesting, this clock. So I didn't notice this at first, but this is a long scene. It's probably 5 minutes of dialogue between the two of them. The clock never moves. And I'll point that out when we get to later in the scene where it's still at 3:33. And I will give huge credit to MT from Heavy Spoilers who pointed out an earlier clock when Rio was there that was at 3:33. And yeah, if you add 3:33 and 3:33, you get 666. So is that a hint that Rio is somehow tied to Mephisto? Well, there are more hints coming on that, so that is very interesting. All right, so back to the little inquisition happening here that's not going too well. Agatha gets pretty mad at Teen, obviously. But once things calm down, she's like, what did you want? What were you after in my house? And he says, the road. She's like, what road? He's like, you of all people should know. So see, he's trying to push her out of the spell too. So then she sees his fingerprints, his fingers, which looks like maybe dark magic, right? And he says, what? It's just ink from the fingerprinting. Is it? Or has he also cast some dark magic? Because, there's so many things going on here. There are theories he might be somehow Billy, maybe Billy's soul put into his body, and therefore might become Wiccan. But as I already alluded to earlier, maybe there's Nicholas is tied into this. Who knows? So much going on. I really want to know your thoughts. I'm still betting on a Wiccan, that he's going to become Wiccan, that he's going to become Billy. But a lot of interesting stuff happening here. All right, so now the spell is starting to falter and to fall apart because Agatha's like, look, what do you know about this? And he's like, nothing. What are you talking about? They're just flowers. And sure enough, they're the flowers of her yard. So what does that mean? That means Wanda's body, quote unquote, was in the yard. So yeah, when she was standing there talking to Herb over the fence about the body, Herb's like, what are you talking about? But he played along with her. So that's kind of wild. All right, so, by the way, notice 3:33. The clock has not changed. And I guarantee you, if you watch the episode again, they were in there for at least a couple minutes. It would have advanced a little bit. No, it is stuck at 3:33. But anyway, he says, why do you keep looking at that painting? And we glance over now and we see it's not a painting, she said. And then she realized, oh, it is a painting. That's her house. She's starting to realize she's sitting in her house. And sure enough, two things going on here. Teen starts chanting in Latin, and I believe it's to help her break out of the spell, whatever he's doing. He's casting magic to get her out. But also notice he's sitting in the same chair that Rio was sitting in because they're in the house. So the spell is slowly falling apart, and Agatha's able to see that she's sitting in her living room right now. Craziness. But she's getting pretty ticked by all this. She says, you know what? You're spending the night in the tank. But of course, he's not really spending the night in the tank. He's spending the night in her closet, as she later discovers when the spell is broken, that sure enough, that arrest was maybe more of a kidnapping. So that is very interesting. The inquisition against him, the questioning, if you will, that was all happening in her living room. Crazy, just crazy. All right, so now she's kind of back in the spell. Agatha/Agnes really, really wants answers. So she, quote unquote, heads back to the morgue, which is probably somewhere in her house, and there's no body. So the spell is literally falling apart so much that the body's gone. So now she has to try to concentrate to remember, what did she look like? She was in her late 20s. She had green eyes. She was 5'7", which, by the way, is exactly what Wanda is in the comics. 5'7", green eyes, and auburn hair, notice, and they don't talk about her age, but because who knows, right? In the comics, she's been 20s for 40 years now in the comics? Anyway, anyway, boom. Back comes Wanda, or supposedly Wanda, and sure enough, she even notices the color of the hair is scarlet. Not auburn, though, scarlet. That is interesting. That shows that the spell isn't perfect, right? In fact, she's thinking Scarlet Witch probably and making the hair be scarlet. But okay, now we're back to the library card again. But one thing I want to point out, because this is so important, if we zoom in, the way these library cards worked, because I'm betting most of the people watching this video never used these library cards because it's all electronic now. I used them, but I didn't even remember this. It's the date due and the borrower's name. Keep that in mind. That's very important. It's not the date it's checked out. It's the date it's due. All right, so we now see that the bottom name is Wanda Maximoff, October 13th. So initially, I was really concerned by that October 13th date because that would, if it's the date checked out, That would mean Wanda checked out the book in October, which would mean WandaVision was in October, which it absolutely is not. It's in November. I'll talk about that more in my timeline video, but it's okay. This is the date it's due back. So, okay, phew. So Wanda Maximoff had to get the book back, supposedly, on October 13th. That works. All right, so now Rio is trying very hard. She's ready to break Agatha out. So Agatha asks, how did she die, referring to the Wanda body. This is interesting. She dodges that. She says, wrong question. So again, this is like Feige not answering whether she's dead. However, she does say the witch is gone, meaning wherever the witch is, she can't hurt you. But that is an interesting choice of words. She didn't say she's dead. She said she's gone, and all the copies of the Darkhold with her. So again, I think Rio cast this spell on top of Wanda's spell to try to convince Agnes, it's safe. You can come out. And then she says she left you trapped in her distorted spell, which I thought was interesting because I thought, well, Wanda's dead. Why didn't the spell go away? Well, I totally forgot. In Infinity War, Doctor Strange explained, you'll find removing a dead man's spell troublesome. So yes, a well-cast spell stays around even when you're dead and is very hard to break out of. Wow. I tell you what, they did a good job on this show of looking at all the different things from the MCU to make this all fit. But now she says, claw your way out. So Agatha reverses through the different outfits she had in WandaVision, and I think this one's hilarious. Notice naughty on her behind there. Well, that was from the Malcolm in the Middle episode. We only saw it for like a fraction of a second, so the detail that they would put that in is amazing. Now, obviously, Kathryn Hahn is later going to be in the buff, and I just want to use this moment to point out that she is 51 years old. You go, girl. Talk about body positivity, and by the way, looking great. But even I don't think she even cared what she looked like. She was more than willing at 51 to do the very first female nude scene in an MCU entry. I'm just thoroughly impressed. Kathryn, you rock. All right, so anyway, she continues to reverse through the outfits. There's this one, which is hilarious. And then finally, we get the black and white original version of her, which that's so cool. And then she looks down and sees she was the one who had checked the book out before Wanda, but again, it was due back on January 31st. That's not the date she checked it out. So, what are these dates? Well, it is probably not coincidental that 4 of them are key people's birthdays. Obviously, Wanda herself, Elizabeth Olsen, and then Kevin Feige, got to put him in there, and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So that's probably all they're meant to be. None of these are meant to be anything binding or relevant, but maybe, for those that want to make Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Runaways canon to the Sacred Timeline, maybe they're the dates that members of those 2 shows, and I won't go through all these, you can check out Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Runaways if you want, but the Darkhold appeared in both of those shows, and here's just an example. We've been toying with this on the Discord, trying lots of different orders. I don't think there's a great answer, but several people have checked the book out. So, yeah, very cool. You can decide. Let me know if you think this is the same Darkhold or a different one. There is a hint coming up in a minute that makes me think they're different Darkholds. But anyway, so now Agatha takes off her last outfit and literally has nothing on. She's back in her house. Notice, remember, the whole time she's been in the house. So when she was in the morgue, that morgue was apparently in her living room. And now she is completely naked, butt naked, and still heads outside to go talk to Herb. That's funny. How long have I been living in this cesspool of a town, she says. And Herb's like, man, that's a little more than I wanted to see this morning, but your answer is about 3 years. And again, I'll do a timeline video where I really go into this in depth because there's some cool stuff about the timeline. All right, but then she's like, Wanda, which immediately makes me think, Newman. I mean, that is a Newman face if I've ever seen one. But all right, so then poor Herb, he's like, well, we try not to say her name. She's kind of like Voldemort to them, I guess. And then but she does say, but if you call me nosy, I'll cut your tongue out. That's funny because remember, she was the nosy neighbor. So yeah, the neighbors though, they're all getting a show. Here's our neighbors over here, and boy, not a great time to go out for a jog. He's like, or maybe a good time depending on your thoughts. But anyway, he turns around and books away. So pretty funny. So Agatha finally goes in once again after giving us her the very first female bear behind. But I love this. She tries to cast a spell. And it's the same hand formation she used in WandaVision in the 8th episode. And notice it doesn't work this time. So she has lost all her powers. But look at that attention to detail. That is So cool. I love this stuff. But anyway, she realizes her lair is gone because remember down in her basement, that's where all this creepy stuff went on. That's all gone. And she realizes that she, Wanda, took every bit of power I had and left me with household appliances. And there's the little bunny. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that bunny in a minute. But the bunny that may or may not be tied somehow to Nicholas Scratch. Who knows? So many mysteries. All right, so Teen is still tied up. That's poor dude. And Rio now shows up and wants blood. She busts the door down, and boy, does she look ready to fight. So see, I think she was waiting for Agatha to get out of the spell, not because she wanted to help her, but because she wanted to kill her, or at least kick some butt. Versus Teen, on the other hand, obviously wanted Agatha out of the spell to go on the witch's road. So they were competing on getting her out. But anyway, now here's Rio looking really menacing. Ricochets off the wall, flies across the room, and traps Agatha. And then they have a little time together to chat, and we learn that they go way back. She says, I've missed you. And then this is interesting. This is why I do wonder if Agatha has had the Darkhold for a long time. She says, how long has it been, Agatha, since you acquired the Darkhold and you hid behind all that dark magic? So, I mean, that seems to imply she's been hiding from Rio for years. Not just during WandaVision, not just a little bit before WandaVision, but for years. So I do think the Darkholds are different in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and in Runaways. But again, I think headcanon is all up to each fan, and I'm totally fine with that. But let me know your thoughts about this line. It just makes me think she's had it for a while. But anyway, then she says, but then you lost it. You lost it, and you lost your protection. But then Agatha gets the upper hand, but Rio explains, you can't kill me. And Agatha says, well, you can't kill me. It's not allowed. That's interesting. It's not allowed to kill other witches? Because we have seen Agatha killed her original coven. So I don't know if that you can't just kill any witch. Something about these two. Are they bound together somehow? Very interesting. All right, so then she says, just let me get my purple back. I love that. And then come find me. So Rio's like, okay, fine. But I'll also tell them where to find you. And let's see, the worst of them. The Salem Seven. I expect you'll see them at sundown. So that's wild. I mean, basically, they're coming by the end of this day, which puts some real urgency on Agatha getting her coven together and getting on the witch's road, right? But speaking of the Salem Seven, this is what they look like in the comics. Obviously, they do not look like this in the series, but there is a Salem Seven, and yeah, they've been problems for Agatha throughout the comics as well. So, all right. Now, this is interesting. Were these two an item? Is this maybe why they can't kill each other? Because Agatha ticked off says, you don't have a heart. And Rio says, oh, I do. It's black and it beats for you. So we're going to come back to this idea of a black heart because that I think is really important. But what we see here is they definitely had some type of relationship in the past. All right, so Rio leaves and then Teen now wants to hit the road. Take me to the witch's road. The road will give you the thing you want the most if you make it to the end. So clearly, this dude knows a lot. In fact, we'll later learn that he knew the people that wrote the Ballad of the Witch's Road. So there is a lot to this guy that we need to find out. Then he says, that's why I saved you from the spell you were under. Isn't that interesting? So he's taking credit, even though clearly Rio had a lot to do with it. So that's why I think he wanted to beat her to the process of getting Agatha out. He wanted Agatha to owe him. So very interesting. All right, then the timing of this is curious because now Agatha opens the locket again and looks at it, and I'm wondering, is this maybe Nicholas's hair? And is that some tie to Teen? Is it Billy's hair? I don't know. But as we see, when she tries to ask Teen who the heck you are, the little W or an M, depending on what you decide that is, goes over his mouth. So he says, my name is Distorts. So yeah, there's no way to find out who this dude is. She's like, interesting. So big mystery. Let me know your thoughts and whether it's tied to the locket or all. I'm only thinking the locket might have something to do with it because she opened it right around the time she was looking at Teen. But nonetheless, now she talks about her last coven. He says, are you taking me to meet your coven? And she's like, oh, no, those harpies are dust. And of course, she's referring to that flashback from WandaVision where they attack her, but then of course she sucks their energy out. And that's important. They attacked her first, and we'll see that is how she's able to take other people's power. But the key there is, I think she hasn't had a coven since then. Let me know your thoughts if I've got that wrong, but I don't think she's had a coven since she killed all of them. So she still hates Wanda. She sees the footer, the footer for the home that Wanda in WandaVision built the home around there for she and Vision. But it's interesting how it's been graffitied. Someone wrote evil witch, and someone else did kind of her headpiece with a line through it. So yeah, and then Agatha spits on it. So yeah, no love lost for Wanda in Westview. But so literally, this is Agatha's first trip out of Westview in 3 years. That is wild to think she's been stuck there all this time. So while they're driving, Teen gets a call from Boy F, which obviously is his boyfriend. So that's kind of cool. I love how it's just, they don't make a huge deal out of it. It just is. And that's cool. That's the way you have representation, by the way. So we'll see if this comes into play more. I'm sure it will. But it's just subtle and then move on. But all right. So then Agatha explains how on earth they're going to find a coven by sunset, right? They only have till sunset. And she says, wherever you are, a coven there shall be. Within any 3-mile radius, there will be a collection of witchy enough people to form a coven. Now, keep in mind, I'm sure you remember at the end of the episode, it seemed like Agatha didn't even care whether the door opened. So I'm not sure that she's really even trying to find qualified witches. She just wants some people that she knows have powers because she has an ulterior motive. But we'll get more to that in a minute. But nonetheless, she's pretty sure she can find them in time. So the first one she goes to is Lilia Calderu, who is a 450-year-old witch, as we will learn, who is skilled in divination. So, in fact, she uses that divination here. She says, you've been under the influence of another. They took your agency for 3 years. So, sure enough, then she learns that Agatha wants her to join the coven, and she's like, what witch in her right mind would join Agatha Harkness's coven? And she's like, well, I'm not looking for right-minded witches as it happens. I love the look on Teen's face. That's funny. But here we learn her age. She says, you don't look a day under 450. So, yep, that's why she's really old. And also she says, I need a divination witch. So, sure enough, all those things we learn. And then, in fact, speaking of the comics, because she is tied into the comics, she's from way back in Marvel Premiere number 12. That was a long, long time ago. And that's what she looked like in the comics. And because she's 450 years old, I'm saying she would have been alive during this time frame. Now, I'm not saying she was one of those witches, but she would have known what Agatha did to the coven. And that's why she was saying, who in their right mind would join your coven? I mean, she was literally alive when this went down. Yikes. Also in the comics, though, and this is really cool, she's tied, or at least her family is tied, to the Book of Cagliostro. I have no idea if they're going to go here in the series, but you might remember the book is the one that we saw in the first Doctor Strange movie with one of the pages missing when Wong says that's the Book of Cagliostro. It's a study of time, and one of the rituals was stolen by a former master. Well, if she is tied somehow to Cagliostro, that's how she's 450 years old. Maybe that's how she cast a spell on several of the witches to be this old. Just a thought. And then also the Eye of Agamotto, which was the cradle of the temporal singularity, i.e. the time stone, that was discovered by Cagliostro for the manipulation and alteration of timelines. So yeah, very, very interesting to see if this comes out at all, but that's kind of fun, bit from the comics. All right, so she says, the road is a death wish. And it's worth noting there is a calendar on her wall and on her refrigerator. And I'll go more into this again in the timeline breakdown. It is November, so you could think, oh, I bet this is happening in November. But notice the year. It's in the 1940s. So she just really has old calendars. But anyway, timeline breakdown coming. I'll go more over that. But Agatha explains she survived. So now we know that Agatha has walked the road and made it to the end. Interesting. So, Lilia does not trust Agatha at all and says, well, if we're successful, are we just going to stand there and watch you turn around and steal our new powers? And she says, no, I can't steal magic unless you blast me with it. So that goes back to what we saw during that Salem witch trial. When they blasted her, that's when she stole their powers. Then also, so she's trying to convince Lilia on multiple levels to go on the witch's road. You're going to get more power, but also you're kind of in financial troubles. And we're going to see everybody is in financial troubles because she's about to get evicted. So she convinces Lilia that you should, well, actually, I don't think Lilia wanted to go, but Lilia's divination convinces Lilia she should go because she writes down 5 names, actually, but 4, including Agatha, and Lilia is one of them. So yeah, she kind of has to join the coven because she saw a vision of the future knowing that she's going to be part of it. But there's one more name that we don't see, and we'll come back to that in a minute. All right, so as they're going to collect all the coven, I think we're seeing members of the Salem Seven who have changed into different animals, in this case, like a crow, watching over Agatha along the way. So now she heads to pick up sorceress Jennifer Kale, who is into potions. Notice she says, I'm assembling a coven and I need a potions guy. Well, Jennifer Kale is also from the comics. In the comics, she looks like that. So she's wearing a bit more clothes in the series. But also she looks like this. And what's cool about some of the adventures that Jennifer had in the comics is she joined with Scarlet Witch and Man-Thing. Oh, my word. I would love even a hint at Man-Thing. We probably won't get it, but that would be awesome if so. All right, so finding Jennifer's motivation. So 2 motivations for her, similar to Lilia. First is, I'm offering you a chance to lift the binding spell that has kept you magicless for the last, century? So in other words, she's going to get power. But if that's not enough, Teen explains, I'm really sorry about your recent legal troubles. Yeah, drowning in class action lawsuits. And as Agatha says, historically, we as a group don't do well in courtrooms. So isn't that interesting? Yet another case of, hey, do it for the power or do it to avoid, going to jail. Your choice. All right, so now there's 2 left, as Teen says. Or is it only 1? Because Agatha goes, no, it's just 1. And Teen's like, what? No, it's 2. Well, Agatha doesn't explain why, but she does not want to get that last one. So, however, the third one, though, she's interested in finding, and that is magician/detective, nice combo, Alice Wu-Gulliver. So, Agatha explains she's a blood witch. In this case, her mom was a witch and also a famous goddess of rock. That's funny, because she wrote the famous version of the Ballad, which again implies there are multiple versions of the Ballad. I love that. So I think what we're going to hear is just different, they're going to sing the Ballad, but with different rock styles, is my guess. We'll see. But anyway, Teen, we find out, knows a lot more than we thought, right? Because he says, my mom, boy, I'd love to know who his mom is, my mom went to see her last tour right before she died. So Alice's mom is dead. That's what we learn here. So while they're talking, yet another member of the Salem Seven keeping an eye on them, this time in the form of a rat. Now, they head into the mall, and Teen is like, you think we're going to find Lorna Wu's daughter in the Westview Mall? Because remember, Lorna is the mom that died, and they're looking for Alice. And she says, well, rumor has it Lorna was lost on the Witch's Road. Okay, so now we found one of the motivations for Alice to figure out what happened to Lorna on the Witch's Road. That is very interesting. So clearly that's going to come into play. And then in the comics, Alice is a character, and sure enough, was both a magician and a detective, and she got the magician powers from birth, so very cool. And so now they meet up with Alice, and they're making sure Alice has multiple motivations. Teen pretends to shoplift, and so they're both kneeling because Teen's on the floor now. And she says, Alice Wu-Gulliver, we need a protection witch. So that's her powers, a protection witch to join us on the Witch's Road. And then, just to make sure there's multiple motivations, they accuse her of assaulting Teen. And sure enough, the security manager fires Alice immediately. And they're like, oh, well, look at that. How convenient. You're out of a job, and we're setting off on the road today. But if that wasn't enough, she also says, and don't you want to know what happened to Mommy? So, yeah, initially Alice, like everybody, is kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this, but she'll eventually show up. All right, so now heading back because Agatha does not want to get the 4th witch. We'll find out more about that in a moment. But she asks Teen, where are you from? And I love how the closed captioning has him go, well, I was born and raised in Eastview, and then continues inaudibly. That's crazy. So first of all, Eastview, not Westview. Interesting. But yeah, Agatha wants to test this out and turns up the radio, and she can hear that just fine. There's a road. Interesting song, right? But anyway, radio works fine. And then finally, when he finishes the stuff she is not allowed to hear, audibly he says, it's so nice to get to know each other a little bit. And Agatha's like, what is going on with this dude? I love it. So many mysteries wrapped around this series. All right, so now she's back to her house, and another member of the Salem Seven is keeping an eye. As a wolf howls, and there he is standing in the street, very menacing. I would be running if I saw that. That's scary. All right, so now inside, Teen is so excited. Time for the party. Does this look centered? And Agatha's like, let me see. Maybe if I just put a little more to the whoosh, and rips it down. I love that. That's funny. And poor Teen's like, hey. But anyway, the time for the party, everybody's shown up that was invited, so that's great. The gang's all here. Let's hit the road. And they're like, no. Where's our green witch, says Jennifer. Green witch. Okay. So I'm guessing that was supposed to be Rio, and I'll talk a little bit more about why in a minute, but we need a green, because in the trailers we see her in green down the road, but we need a green witch. Well, in the comics, there was an Emerald Warlock, so some have theorized that maybe that's what she's playing. But either way, I think she is a green witch because earth magic is arguably the most important skill set that we need on the witch's road. And hey, back to the song again, right? Wake thy power, earthly and divine. And Agatha's like, I've heard it. But nonetheless, if we look back again at the Witch's Road ballad, notice, wake thy power, earthly and divine. So yeah, slowly all of these elements are coming together. Very, very cool. Okay, so Lilia then remembers the fourth name she wrote down. It wasn't a name, it was literally a black heart. Okay, let's talk about this. So black heart. Remember, Rio had said, I have a heart, it's black, and it beats for you. So keeping in mind the 333 and the Mephisto and all that, well, Blackheart in the comics is the quote-unquote son of Mephisto. Man, is Rio tied to Mephisto? Now, Jack Schaefer in interviews has said she understood that in WandaVision, they threw some hints out for things and got people theorizing, and she felt kind of bad that she did that on things that were never going to get realized. She said it was an accident. I didn't mean to do it. She said, this time around, I'm going to make sure everything leads somewhere. So I think all these lines are really going to come together. It is worth noting Blackheart as a character showed up in the first Ghost Rider movie, but I don't think there's going to be any ties to him. Instead, it'll be more like in the comics where Blackheart is tied to Mephisto directly. Well, actually, he was too. This guy was too. But I mean, it's not going to be that dude. Rio's not that dude. That's what I mean to say. All right. So anyway, Agatha's like, well, any Hart's going to do. I don't need a black heart, just someone named Hart. So she's like, thank you, Mrs. Hart. Do you want to come to the party? She's like, no. It's Mrs. Davis, dear. She's like, okay, right, whatever. And then she's like, Mrs. Hart was what Wanda branded me. I haven't been to a party since Mr. Davis passed away. Aw, remember Mr. Davis? He almost passed away during WandaVision. And then it seems that afterwards he did ultimately pass away. What a bummer. Poor Mrs. Hart. Or poor Mrs. Davis. But then Agatha's like, okay, look, are you in or are you out, Hart? So she just keeps calling her Mrs. Hart. That's funny. She didn't care what her name is. So anyway, she gets her to come, and sure enough, we're all ready to go, but she kind of shoos away Teen. She's like, look, you don't drive to the road, Teen, she calls him. The road is conjured. So why don't you head upstairs and just let us do our little thing, okay? You know, he's like, well, you're going to call me, right? You're going to call me. She's like, oh, yeah, I'll call you. No, she had no intention of bringing him down. That is interesting. So even though he helped her get out of the spell, even though that was his only request, she was going to leave him behind. Interesting. So she says, all we need to do is sing the ballad and a door will appear. And I love this. Jennifer's like, so who's going high? And Mrs. Hart, Mrs. Davis goes, oh, no, thank you. I don't do drugs, which of course is totally a reference to that 70s show where like everybody on the show did drugs. So very funny. She's got some awesome one-liners, and we'll have many more, I'm sure. Then this is interesting. Remember, Lilia is into divination. That's her power. And she just screams randomly, get off me. And then kind of looks around like, oh, sorry. Well, that was clearly a vision of the future. So I think probably in episode 3, in fact, something's going to land on her and she's going to scream, get off me. But more importantly, I think we should listen to the things she says that don't seem to make sense at the time, because they're probably going to be hints of things to come. Very, very cool. All right, so now, finally it's time to sing the ballad. And notice, this is the sacred chant version. So again, I think there's going to be many, many different versions. So they're all singing while... and that's just so funny. Mrs. Hart, Mrs. Davis, is like, am I supposed to know this song? Too funny. Anyway, upstairs, while they're singing, we see Teen hearing the noises outside. And I thought the closed captioning was really interesting. The Salem Seven is sounding like children talking indistinctly. Why are they children? Very interesting. I mean, they're not children, but why do they sound like it? Then we have disembodied voices whispering. So, yeah, closed captioning is always interesting, especially on a second viewing. It's kind of distracting on a first viewing, but always worth a second viewing. So he goes outside to check out what's going on, and now here's a real nice view of the bunny. So this is not the same bunny from WandaVision. I mean, it's the same, meant to be the same bunny. It's just clearly not, because look at the ears are totally different. Maybe the bunny died. Who knows what happened? But all I can say is, thought we wouldn't notice, but we did. But nonetheless, it's the same bunny conceptually. We're good. We're good. So the Salem Seven now arrive, looking very spooky. Poor Herb is like, are you seeing this? And this is just so cool when they just all come flying out. They are so creepy. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'm out. I'm done. I don't know what's going on, but I'm done. And then even Teen's like, oh no. So he books it inside and starts trying to barricade the house while these guys start doing creepy stuff. Look at those masks. Yikes. And we know they can turn into the different animals, so that's pretty creepy. And then this move was sweet too. They just do so many creepy moves. But here's what I don't get. What is Teen thinking? He barricades the house, yes, and then sits by a window. Totally a horror movie move, right? That's what everybody does. No, you don't hide under the bed or whatever. You sit right by the window, and then the voice is whispering Agatha Harkness, and of course, they jump in the window at him. No surprise, right? So he books it downstairs. Meanwhile, they finish the song, but it didn't work. The ballad didn't work. It didn't summon the door. So she's pretty ticked off, and although I think she's pretend ticked off. My guess, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I don't think Agatha even thought the spell would work. I think she wanted to get the witches here to, well, they figure it out. This is a power grab. She wants us to attack her. And in fact, she just gives it up. It says, okay, I don't have time for this. Just blast me. So I think all along she could care less whether or not the door appeared. And yet, suddenly it does. So that's interesting because she said normally it appears much faster. So I'm wondering what was going on there. But nonetheless, what is that? And there's the door. So tell me if you think like something else made the door appear. Did maybe Teen make it appear? I don't know. It could have just been it took a while for dramatic effect. But nonetheless, it does finally appear. And sure enough, they open it up. That's pretty cool. And then down the stairs, they'll be able to walk down the little spiral staircase there. And while they're looking at that, Teen comes flying in the room. Is that it? Is that the road? Because we really, really, really should go like right now. And he books down the stairs. And we see why. Because the Salem Seven have now entered the house. They're sliding down the stairs, creaking, screeching, grunting. Yeesh. So everybody books it down the passageway. And now the only way out is forward. Because as soon as Agatha turns around, the screaming stops because the door has sealed. Oh my goodness. Being claustrophobic, I would be freaked out right now. But not Agatha. She's, nope, that's fine. I've done this before. So she heads down the stairs, really cool looking. I love the glowing. Until now, she's back on the road. And one of the neat things that several of the actresses in the series have said is the set was as big as a football field. They said it literally was a road, so it made them really feel like they were walking down it. This isn't the volume. I mean, I'm not saying there won't be some CGI, but in general, they are tangibly walking on this. That is so cool. So they take off their shoes in respect, which you might remember, Wanda, if you will, Wanda's body, the fake body, but it had no shoes. Had no shoes. Is that because she also walked the road? Is that because she's at the end of the road? I mean, you might remember in the comic Witch's Road, it was Wanda walking the road. So are they going to end up rescuing Wanda? I mean, I kind of don't think so. We know that Vision Quest is the third part of a trilogy, WandaVision, Agatha All Along, and then Vision Quest. So I don't think we're going to see Agatha or Wanda till then. But let me know your thoughts. It is interesting that she was not wearing shoes. All right, so in other words, so when the castle, Wundagore Castle fell on her, did she end up trapped in the Witch's Road? That's what I'm trying to get at in my theory, in case that didn't make sense. But anyway, I love how Agatha's like, nope, never doubted it for a second. Yep, we're all good. So they take off down the road. I love that shot, leaving their shoes behind, off on the adventure. Oh my goodness. I loved these 2 episodes. I hope you did too. And notice, here's the schedule. I included 2 different versions of it because they're both cool looking. But what I love is it will end right before Halloween on October 30th with a double header. Oh my. Cannot wait. Let me know your thoughts. Are you excited? Have you enjoyed this? Is it what you expected? What do you think is going to happen before this thing is done? I am so pumped. Also, don't forget, September contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook, and there's that membership option in case you're interested. And of course, we have the Discord. Love to talk about the Discord. Notice we have a spoiler section. Here we are talking about Agatha All Along. Billy is mentioning Nicholas Scratch, the rabbit, and all the connections there. So the spoiler section. Obviously, we'll be talking spoilers. You don't want to go in there until you've seen the episodes, but it's a lot of fun, and it's a safe way to discuss those things. So I will leave a pinned comment so you can join 1,700 members across the globe Conversations 24/7, and we want you to be part of it. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.